We're starting.
Here we go. Hello, everybody. We got a really special Jaws coffee chat today. Um, First of all, I want to welcome you to Jaws Christ Talk. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Christ Talk Special on December 21st, 2023. Today we have Justin Tarr, who is my grandson, with us. And I want to give a special thanks to Wingate TV, Transform U Media, Zach with Pack Channel, and Jay Stoyhan with Disability Channel for hosting our shows. Please be sure to share and subscribe to our page or wherever you found us. Now, let's get to the show. Um, we have a special program today, and we're actually going to be talking about a movie that everybody likes to watch around Christmas time, but it's a very special movie, and it was made way back in, I believe, 1946 or 47 or even 48. I'm not quite sure. And it starred Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed and a bunch of other great actors. And it's called A Wonderful Life. Um, a couple of years ago, Justin had watched It's a Wonderful Life, and he said, and he talked about God's middle knowledge and how it resembled that. Hey, Justin, would you explain what God's middle knowledge is and what that means, and so people can understand why it kind of relates to the movie?
Yeah. So the way I've heard it described by philosopher William Lane Craig is that God's middle knowledge is God's knowledge of the truth value of any subjunctive conditional, meaning if things were one way, then the resulting world would be, this way. Such as if I were to offer, you know, a kid $100 just to have, they would say yes. God would know the answer of what a the truth value of that if, like, and we actually see this actually in when David asks God, will the people hand me over to Saul when Saul was hunting him down, and God tells him yes. That was a prophecy that never actually happened, and it's an example of God's middle knowledge in the Old Testament. We actually have an example of God's middle knowledge again in the New Testament when Jesus says, if Sodom and Gomorrah would have seen what you guys have seen, then they would have repented in sackcloth and ashes. That's another example of God's middle knowledge, God's knowledge of things that could, would be under certain circumstances.
Okay. Um, and the reason why it relates to this movie is because um, George Bailey had a really bad, probably a couple of weeks, and it really came to a head that last day. And a lot of bad things were happening to him, and and if a lot of people don't know that, we'll bring it in. He's a family man in a small town, Bedford. I think it was called Bedford, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
Bedford Falls, if I remember
Bedford
correctly.
Falls. And his dad ran a bank, and when his dad died, he took over the bank, and it was a penny ante um, a, bank for
Very
people to
small.
help.
It was a very small town bank, and the main antagonist is this man named Potter, who, sort of the fat cat, the stereotypical fat cat,
Yeah.
and he owned everything. And in fact, later on in the movie, he really comes center stage when George Bailey, the main big climax of the movie, we see that a world in which George Bailey does not exist, sort of showing us that idea of God's middle knowledge. And
Right. George
and
Bailey had
what
George
happens is
Bailey.
the place Bedford Falls in the world without George Bailey becomes Potterville, to
Yeah.
give you an idea of you know how much this was an antagonistic character throughout the whole
But George
movie.
Bailey actually brought it up. He said maybe it would be better if I wasn't. I was had never been born. And the angel that was trying to get his wings talked it over, and he goes, "Oh, okay, let's maybe make it better that he was never born, and let's go out and take a look and see what that was all about." The very first thing after they granted his wish, he could hear again, and he could never hear. That's why I kind of understood George Bailey, because I was deaf in my left ear as a kid, and George Bailey is too, and now he can hear out of his left ear.
And it's so funny how at first he just like this lifelong disability. He's like, oh, must have been the cold water. You know, he's so quick to just describe it up to some natural thing. Oh yeah, right. Whatever. And you know that the big climax is actually what was the cinch for getting George Bailey to do the, or rather the actor Jimmy Stewart to do the movie, was that pitch. Actually, there's an article, 2 articles that were released today by the Daily Wire covering over Jimmy Stewart's life, and the second part, it says, he said, Frank, if you want to do a picture about a guy who jumps off a bridge and an angel named Clarence who hasn't won his wings yet coming down to save him, well, I'm your man. And that, I guess that really resonated with him, because beforehand, Jimmy didn't want to, like, he walked off the pitch. And so this was actually the second time they pitched it to him. And I guess that sort of resonated with him too, as well as because he was part of like flying and all of that. That was one thing he did in the military, was fly an airplane.
Yeah, he flew the Flying Fortresses.
Oh yeah, the big old bombers.
B-17s.
Yeah, and he was part of the bombers. And he prior to that, he was asked, like, do you want to do like movies? We'll make you look like a war hero, and he was having trouble getting back into Hollywood after he came back from the military, because he ended up getting such bad PTSD from the whole experience of going and bombing people. And I guess apparently it wasn't as much the actual act of going out and doing it. It was the fear of making the kind of mistake that would lead to the death of other people. And that was his big concern. And that's eventually why he stopped being a bomber. And so, but it was that losing his, he got grounded. And so I guess maybe he resonated with that message, Clarence is trying to regain his wings. And that's also why that a lot of that emotion, that PTSD coming out, why, that the climax was so impactful, because he really bore all those emotions out at the very end. And the director actually zooms in and sacrifices some of the quality to zoom into George Bailey's, Jimmy Stewart's real tears, real, emotional breakdown as he prays to God in those moments when he's considering taking his life, which is the whole movie's premised around from the very beginning. We're not really spoiling that part too much, because it says it, but it's a movie's older than I think even you, Grandpa. So if people haven't watched it,
yeah, it is.
They need to go watch it.
When he does his prayer, he's at a bar, and he's asking God, I'm in real trouble, I need help. And the very first thing that happens is the school teacher finds out it's George Bailey, because he had an episode with him on the telephone about his wife. And the school teacher punches him out. I was like, oh, that's just like God, to set us up for what's to come into the future. Yeah. And sometimes we get nailed on the nose, you know.
And there's something beautiful about that too, because it's like, if we're gonna pray to God and ask him for what we want, be ready if the answer of what we need in that moment, rather, we're praying for what we need, like, God, give me what I need, I really need this, he may actually give you what you need, and what you need might just be a punch in the face.
Well, it woke him up. And and then it went from there. Then he went over to the bridge, and then Clarence, the angel, jumped into the river to save George Bailey. And George Bailey was like, oh, you jumped in the water to save me.
Yeah.
Because George Bailey was the one that jumped in the water to save Clarence. And so that was kind of, but I got to thinking about it. That was really fast thinking by Clarence to do that,
Yeah, that's some wisdom right there,
Yeah.
Smart person would try to convince him not to jump. The wise person would jump instead.
I don't have time. I just got to do it now, But in the beginning of the movie, when they called Clarence up with the other two big angels because Clarence was trying to win his wings. And they talked to him, and he said, there's a lot of people in Bedford Falls that are praying for this individual by the name of George Bailey. So we need to send you down and help him. And George Bailey said, well, I win my wings if I do this and save George Bailey. And he goes, yes, you will. So the middle knowledge part of this was giving George Bailey a perspective that usually only God has. Why did he put our spirit? Why did he put our soul into this shell of a body at this point in time in the universe? And only God has understanding of that. So they gave George Bailey what it was like not to have been born. So all the different things that occurred. And that town really became rough and bad, and everything that had to do with it just was really wacko. And the very fact that his brother died before because he was a hero in the Second World War, and he was not there to save everybody in the Second World War because George Bailey hadn't been born and hadn't saved his brother back at the pool or the water when he fell in. So there's a lot of
we
interesting.
underestimate how much that all just cascades out. It reminds me of I remember watching these Mandelbrot zooms, right? If you've never seen a Mandelbrot zoom, what it is they take an equation. I think it's 3x plus 1 or 3x plus 2. I think it's 3x plus 1, and it messes around with set theory, like mathematical set theory, and then they take this and they make a set out of it, out of this small equation, and they apply some rules, and then they put that out on a grid of what's called the complex plane, which includes I is square root of -1, and all this math happens, right? And they make this thing, this Mandelbrot set, but it's what it is a giant fractal. It's the most common one that you look up fractal, that's what's going to come up on Google. And the curious thing about it is it can zoom in forever and ever and ever, and people apply these other rules to make it like very beautiful and have all these extra colors and such. But my point is, you start off on one little bit and then you zoom in more, and then it's the same thing. It's just spread out more, and it just goes down. And we see these fractals everywhere. We see them in just a tree. It sprouts up once, then it has branches, and then those branches have branches. You can see that in some crystals. There's a kind of broccoli that looks like a fractal, but and a lot of times our actions branch out in the same way. You do one small act of kindness that brightens someone's day. They go and bless someone else who maybe really needed it. Maybe they're on that person that they happen to be nice through two or three social interactions away. Maybe that person was affected in a way that it saved their life because they were going to end their own life that day. But because that person was in a great mood, they were willing to speak out and brighten that person's day. And that only happened because you were first there to bless them. But it also works the same way. You sin, you ruin someone's day. They go and curse someone out. That person decides to go home and beat their kids. That kid grows up to be a serial killer. I mean, we have no idea of how complex events just become suddenly out of nowhere. It seems like it's just, a small little thing like eating an apple, but really it's like the condemnation of all mankind. It's starting out that fractal of evil or fractal of good in good situations, but that fractal of evil that just permeates all of creation and makes it all bad. We really don't take seriously our sin and our place in creation and how much we affect reality. But that's also why God, is the fact that he knows everything, including what could be under certain circumstances. That's why he's able to have control over something so complex. He's able to see all of it. He's able to see what is and what isn't and what could be. And that's what his middle knowledge really encompasses, is that what that could be, that under certain circumstances.
Right. The cascade, you're right about the cascade in our lives. I was thinking about somebody that was talking about the cascading of prayers when you save somebody. And I know in my own family, in my own life, when I helped and witnessed to different people and they became Christians, eventually they witnessed to somebody else and other people in their family. It was like this cascading effect. And I think it's been that way, this cascading effect, since Jesus walked the earth, and it cascaded down into the apostles. Then the apostles went out and talked to other people in different countries and stuff like that. So for 2,000 years, it's been a cascading effect about Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And the complexity of the events, I mean, there really is, unless God is truly omnipotent, no amount of wisdom, like I've heard like open theism and such, like he has knowledge of all subjunctive conditionals, but who knows what might happen, and it's just wisdom that gets him through it. I mean, you couldn't get through the complexity of reality off of just wisdom and, you know, knowing everything that's going on at that moment. You know, God's middle knowledge is another step past that. It's not just knowing what all the things that could be and would be, it's also knowing like what things, you know, are in the contrast to the what the coulds and the would. I mean, I remember you know, there's a big question in Christian in that people always ask, you know, why do the good die young, right? Why is it that people, God allows evil and suffering to happen to the righteous, right? Especially people who die. And you know, Isaiah's position was just that they die in order to be spared from evil. I mean, that's the verse, Isaiah 57:1. No one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. And Solomon's position is that too. You know, it's better to, you know, the day of one's death is better than the day of one's life. You know, he talks about it is in terms of you know, the evil, you know, the dead are better off than the living, because the dead, you know, are rest from the they have rest from the evil that's done under the sun. Better still are the ones who are never been born, right?
right.
And that's the difference between Christianity, though, is that we're born twice. So
Yes.
the math puts it in our favor on that one.
Yes. And the second prayer that George Bailey does, he's back at the bridge after going through all this stuff. And the cops are after him, and people are trying to chase him down and everything. And he goes back to the bridge and he prays there. He says, Lord, I take it back. I forget exactly what he said, but
He
Lord,
said, "I want to live again." That was
I want to live
my
again.
favorite line of the whole thing. He says, "I want to live again.
Yes.
Please,
And
God, I want to live." And you know, it's just like to be able to see your own impact on the world. You know, that really is a gift. I mean, that and we can only have that in, you know, a fictional movie, right? But the point of it is that it's humbling, because it's like, oh my gosh, you know, all these things that I care about would just be gone if it wasn't for me. You know, everything that I work for, you know, it's easy to just think, flippantly, it's like, does this really matter? It's like, yeah, it doesn't always, not everything we do have to quote matter, because the cascade effect could hit something else that actually does matter. And in that way, because that, you know, the small butterfly effect pushes it all out, everything we do matters. Like it's really a wonder that we aren't so paralyzed by fear in everything we do, because if you know, if we really thought about it, we ought to be terrified of every action we make and really be humbled by just
I
how
feel
much
guilty of
impact it
that. I feel guilty. And the interesting thing was when George Bailey said the second prayer on the bridge, you could see the snow coming back down.
has.
Because when he was asking that he was never been born, a lot of people miss it. But outside the window, the snow stopped coming down outside the window there. And then when he prayed that he wanted to live again, the snow started up. And then Bert, the cop, shows up and he goes, "Where the Sam Hill have you been?"
And he's ready to fight him too. He's ready to go to
And
bat.
he goes, "Do you know me?" He goes, "Of course I know you."
I think he's
And
like,
then he runs all the way home. And when he goes to the front door, his wife Mary is not there, but the kids are. And he goes to run upstairs and he grabs that knob on the stairs and he pulls it off and kisses it. And before that, he was like complaining about how beat up his house was and everything was falling apart. And now he loved his house, he loved his family. And he goes back in there, and the bank auditors are waiting for him too, and he goes, "Hey, Merry Christmas!" And then Mary shows up, and then all the people in the town started showing up with money to bail George Bailey out. It almost makes me want to cry right now because I don't think he understood how many people really leaned on him and how much of an effect he had on so many people in the town. And they all came in, and you just would have to watch it. They did such a wonderful job at the end there. And then how they realized that Clarence got his wings was a real kick in the butt. But I just it was just wonderful. You were going to read something about Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, so we ended up talking about a lot of the content anyways. So,
That's all right. Read it. Read the what the Daily Wire had to say.
yeah, so it just talked about how uh how he was preparing for war beforehand. James Matlin Stewart, I guess was his full name. He was preparing to go to war for several years before he was drafted. 2 years before, he ended up going to Europe and just sort of get a lay of the land, sort of expecting that he was going to come and like have to fight, right? And then he was actually rejected when he first tried to go in because they said he was too skinny. That he was too skinny, and so he tried to gain some weight, and then he had to end up getting a doctor's note saying, "I'm just genetically predisposed to being skinny." But yeah, after that he ended up being that's when he became the bomber, and then from being the bomber, he I guess he it looks like he might have been an actor a bit before he
Yeah,
did.
he was. He was, and he had made some really big movies.
Yeah, the Philadelphia Story. I guess he won the Best Actor win in the 1940s, Philadelphia, and but he wanted to go and see combat, so that's what they put him on being a bomber, and that's what he went and did. And so
And people got to realize that being a bomber in B-17, it scared the living crap out of all the whole bomber crew. I don't know what the percentage was, but like 40% of American men that flew these bombers died or were shot down. Even
yeah,
though this was a state of the art airplane, the Germans were so good at shooting them down. And Jimmy Stewart he was really screwed up after the war, and they had to put him into a hospital for I don't know 8 months, 9 months before they sent him back to the United States because of his brain was not right.
well, what happened was, and it talks about it in the Daily Wire article, is
Okay,
that they were sent out to fight, and on his 10th mission, they got shot, right? And it left a huge hole. I guess it was right next to the fuselage of a plane, and it was apparently only a couple feet from from his like inches from his feet. So he almost like lost his feet from it. It was only a couple inches, and they while they're flying though, even though they're shot, they saw one of their other planes hit smoke and then eventually lose a wing and tumble to the ground and die. And so they didn't make it. And so there's probably with that PTSD, there's probably a bit of survivor's guilt in there too. Well, that really comes down. Survivor's guilt is really hard because it's like why should it have been me? I don't want to live. Why did I ever? Why was it me? Now I can't even be happy with the life these other people don't even get to have. There's even survivors from the Hamas 7th attacks who have gone and committed suicide because of what they saw and the survivor's guilt likely that they have as a result. But yeah, it's also for George, like we said earlier, it was that paralyzing the paralyzing effect of having the decision making, like when he's trying to I'm stumbling over my words. He got so anxious about and so stressed about making the wrong choice, and he
right.
couldn't function anymore, and that PTSD, because if he would have if they would have been doing one little thing a little bit, he would have lost a leg. If they would have been just a little bit to, the right or the left, maybe they would have lost the fuselage. He's got to make those split second decisions, and if he's wrong even a little bit, people die. Other people die too, and that's hard. It's I think Jordan Peterson said it's not what people uh, don't do, or people what oftentimes give them PTSD. It's what they do that gives them PTSD, because they can't believe they made those decisions, and then they just replay it in their mind, and that's really a lot of times what it gets them.
Right.
I don't have like wartime PTSD, so I can't speak to that kind of thing, but that's at least how he described it. And so he struggled with that, and when we went back to Hollywood, you know he tried to get back into it, but he found that things were a lot different, and he didn't really want to do propaganda videos or anything. But eventually, he was pitched It's a Wonderful Life, and incidentally, just how much we talk it up, it was a massive flop when it released in 1947. Huge flop. And apparently it was also only released because of a clerical error. The company that one of his roommates, one of his friends, started in order to get the movie and all that going, it went out. So the movie rights went to a different company, and because of a clerical error to renew it, it went into public domain. And when it hit public domain, all the TV channels and all that, they just started playing it, and that's why we all know and love it today, is because everyone got to know it during that 20 years that it ran. But eventually it became owned again. But that 20 years was enough to really make it popular.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that was when it came out in 1948. Why people didn't want to go see it. Maybe it was too soon after the Second World War, and it took a lot of people through that again. They just did not want to have to revisit that again, because the United States and people in America were just tired of war, and so many men had died, women too, and they touched every city in the United States, and I think they were done with anything that even resembled what had happened in the Second World War. And you got to think about it, what occurred, because there's a big section in the movie that the war breaks out. George Bailey is doing this, and Potter is telling people who's eligible for the draft, and Mary is out there passing out donuts. So everybody in the town got involved. So I think it just was something that a lot of people just didn't want to touch at the time, but it did, and you can see.
1970s is when that happened, by the way. The 1970s, and then it was open for about 20 years.
Yeah, so it shows that if God has a will, it will happen, and this is people today, even with A Wonderful Life, a lot of people identify with this, even if they're not Christian. They identify with this feeling. What if I wasn't born? And especially when it comes to suicide and everything. Suicide was not a big deal in those days like it is today. Suicide is a big deal today. There's so many people that are young and old are committing suicide because they just don't see hope. And there was so much hope in this movie and nothing really changed. Nothing really had happened. It was George Bailey's perspective on his life changed everything and how he looked at it. And that was the huge part, there were so many funny things, hilarious things in the movie that happened also. So it's almost a comedy if it wasn't so serious.
It's a drama for sure.
Because it was very serious. It told a lot of stories to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I also had heard and read a story about Potter, the guy that played the part of Potter.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Stewart had broken down a number of occasions during the making of this movie. This was the first movie that he made after he got back from the war. And Potter actually came to his aid. And off the set, he went and he talked to Jimmy, and he talked to him about getting back into making movies. What else would you want to do? You can really make a positive impact on the movies that you do. So he kind of really walked because Potter is such a nasty character in the movie, but real life, he really helped Jimmy Stewart get
Mm-hmm.
his bearings and get back on his feet again.
Yeah.
I just thought,
The
go
Daily
ahead.
Wire recorded a interaction they had actually where Jimmy was complaining about the superficiality of Hollywood and acting and how it's all fake and everything, and Lionel Barrymore, the actor who
Yeah.
played Potter, he told him, so it's more worthwhile to drop bombs on people than to entertain them. And that probably set him up. It's like, hey, what we're doing is we're entertaining people. What else are we gonna do? Drop bombs on them? I mean, it's not like going and killing people across the world are somehow better. It's different, and you know,
Yeah, I just Lionel Barrymore must have been a real character for him to accept Jimmy Stewart like that, and realizing that this man was having a problem, yeah, mental issues, and he went to his aid. So different than the movie script of the guy himself.
mhm. Yeah.
There were so many great people in this movie. I There was a lot of people, character actors that were in this. The guy that was a cop and the guy that was a cab driver. And I always remember that when that really good looking blonde was walking down the street, and Jimmy Stewart is with the cop and the taxi driver, and he goes, "You got it on," and she goes, "Yeah, I wear that. I don't care how I look." And then she walks across the street, and that old guy's walking across the street. He almost gets hit by a car. But it was just stuff like that that was just really funny. Just make you laugh. But it was so serious, and it has resonated with many people through the decades. It resonates with me every time I watch it. By the end of the movie, I'm just in tears because
Mhm.
I know I could be Jimmy Stewart. I could have
Yeah,
been George Bailey.
I think what sells it is the seeming mundaneness of Jimmy's life, or not Jimmy, but of George Bailey's life. He's just some small town banker, kind of just doing his thing, trying to make things a little bit better here and there, and he gets a glimpse of what it looks like when he's just not there to try to make things better. It's easy to get bogged down with the small things here and there, and all of the troubles that we deal with, but we really underestimate, yeah, if you do one small thing, it cascades out into some fractal event of good things. If you do a lot of small things, then that builds up over time and into a whole life, into a whole series of doing small things where you go back and see the wisdom of God in choosing your life having gone the way that it did. and
Right.
and so there was a bit of trust in that too, because when you were starting to lose hope and faith and trust that, is this really the way it should be? Why did God make me? Why did he have to make me? Why did he have to put me in this body? I don't want to die, but because then everyone will be sad. I just wanted not to have existed. And George Bailey got to see that. It's like, well, if you didn't exist, you didn't do this small thing that led to that, this small thing that led to that, this small thing that led to that. I mean, it's so easy to forget some small interaction that might have made a massive impact on someone, knowingly or unknowingly. I'm sure there might have been a time where, that one of us might have, stepped in and said, "Oh, hey, be careful. You almost walked into traffic," and we don't even remember such a small interaction that could have ended in that person's life. If we weren't there, then that person would have been hit. And there's there's undoubtedly dozens or thousands of those kind of interactions that we have on a daily basis. And that's
Well,
the only
it
thing that
was,
separates, those interactions and, from other interactions is that God was like, okay, of all the different interactions that are going to happen, what set of them am I going to choose? And that's the world we got, is the set that God thought would be the best, the one
yeah,
that he decided to
um,
actualize, and we get to participate in that with
right.
our decision making. That's what's really cool.
Two big things, but before George Bailey became an adult, had happened. Number one, he saved his brother, and all the other kids did too. They turned into this thing to get him out. But Mr. Gower, the druggist,
Yep.
remember when he had made the mistake of putting arsenic in the pills
It was it
in
was a
Jimmy's?
it was candy shop. It was a candy shop, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a candy and a drugstore. It was both things, and a fountain. I think it was called a fountain, you know. And George Bailey picked up on it because Mr. Gower's son had died of the flu at the end of the First World War, and that's what. And he had gotten a telegram, and he was drinking that day, so he'd gotten pretty loaded because his son had died. And so Mr. Gower had made the wrong pills, and Jimmy Stewart was supposed to go deliver them, but he didn't want to because he saw the wrong stuff was in it. And then Mr. Gower, when he came back and the people were complaining that they didn't get their medicine yet, Mr. Gower smacked Jimmy Stewart up alongside the head, you know, in his ear. And and then he started crying and say, "But you made a mistake. You made a mistake." And when Mr. Gower saw that, the fact that he immediately stopped what he was doing and just started asking for forgiveness. Um, that see, there was so many powerful aspects to the movie of cascading things because when he went to the bar, Mr. Gower was there, but he had spent time in prison because he had poisoned these people with that. But
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart was not there to stop it.
And
You
and
know?
and then all he was a drunk from then on. It wasn't just that he drank that one time of bad. He just, at that point on, after, if Jimmy wasn't there, from that point on, Mr. Dower's life was just hell, and it was all because of one lapse of judgment where he was mourning, made an unwise choice, and then that soured his ability to perceive the difference between arsenic and what the actual substance he needed to pill was, because he was making pills. If you remember, he was making pills, custom pills, and filling in. He accidentally filled it with arsenic. So
Yeah, the deal is with this movie, don't watch it when you're tired because you close your eyes for a minute and you're going to miss something because for a mundane movie or something that didn't have a lot of action in it, it went by fast and it had a very, very big storyline.
yes, but
Um,
it's a long movie though. So if anyone's watching, they should know that it's not. Part of why you don't watch it when you're tired is also because it's a long movie.
yeah. I love the part when he used to come into the drugstore and there was this thing that you lit up. It's like a lighter. And when it would light up, you had to make a wish.
Yep, and
And then
he would
he'd
just
go,
and then do
hot
like a flag.
dog, hot dog. And then Mr. Gower gave him, because George Bailey had wanted to travel his whole life. He just dreamed about traveling. So that was, we got to talk about that for a second because sometimes we have expectations in our life. And I know I have. And when they're unfilled expectations, because that's what made him look at running the savings and loan in such a negative light and looking at his dad somewhat negatively because he wanted something else in his life. He thought it would fulfill him because he wanted to go to all these different countries and then get a college degree to see what the people in college knew. So, and then when he, I think when he, at the end of the movie, he realizes that his real dream, his real miracle in his life was actually the life he led and running the savings and loan. I could just see, um, I'd love to see another movie after that, how his life turned out, how he reflected and looked at life again,
Mhm.
how it was, but maybe it shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't see that part of it because we'd be disappointed. Um, but I can just see a lot of scenarios playing out in my mind that night after everybody left and they were paying off all the bank auditors and stuff like that. How his relationship with Potter turned out and what the savings and loan was like. And they had that big run on the bank and they lost all the money but $2 and they went dancing into the vault. Uh,
Mama dollar, Papa dollar, the
yeah.
dollar children. Yeah, and remember that was the thousands of dollars that he had saved up to go on his honeymoon. So
Yeah.
he sacrificed going, and he just didn't let go. It reminds me of a movie, and I think it was a book before. It was like Five People You Meet in Heaven or something like that. And I remember the primary character had an abusive father, and I think he took over the job that his dad had, if I remember correctly, which was working at some fair, and he was just like a maintenance guy, and he wanted to get the hell out of there, just like George Bailey does, just like everyone does. He just wanted to get the hell out of there, and he got stuck at that job, and he just never left. And he was looking back on it with such resentment. But just like George Bailey, he went to the military, and so part of the five people you meet in heaven, he's going to meeting all these people, some people he hadn't even met, but he interacted with and completely changed the life of, and had a drastic effect on them, both good and bad, to the point where he had killed people, and he had met them. That was some of the people that he met. But there was that sort of the same motif was because he was a maintenance person. That was what he needed to do. If that he didn't fix it, then that whole place, people could have died. It was because he was there doing it, that the world was made a better place, that people lived and people enjoyed, people got entertained, people were doing something better with their time than going and killing each other overseas, which is what another thing that he did in that movie, just like George, almost wanted to, his brother did, but also what Jimmy Stewart was struggling with in real life. It's looking at it as like, we don't need all these crazy things happening around. We don't need to go and kill each other. We're not made for that. The beauty of human life is our interaction with each other, making things better, rather than this glorification that we see of war, and wishing something was better, when being not being content with what we already have. And ambition's good, but unchecked ambition just leaves someone empty. And a lot of what Solomon talks about is money. Nobody's ever pleased with how much money they have, right? They always want more. And all it does is look good to them. Same thing with having lots of food. Solomon criticizes that too. It's just going to be there. You're just going to watch other people eat it. Everything's going to fade away. It's all just going to fade away. So what really
Yeah.
matters? The wonderful life, really drives the same point home that that I think the Ecclesiastes does, which is the only thing that matters is God and people, because God's work is the only thing that remains. Everything else is vapor, but only God's work actually stays. And that's because God sees all every possibility, and He selected which reality to actualize with his divine knowledge of subjunctive conditionals. It's because of that He's able to decide what better world we're going to have to be able to live. Even though we think it's mundane, He chose it, He tailored it, He curated our experience. And yeah, I forget exactly where I was going with that, but yeah.
I got to, I, part of me that resembled George Bailey is he wanted to travel, but all my life I wanted to become a success at something. And I thought it was um, being a photographer, being a world renowned wildlife photographer. Yeah, I became a photographer and shot a lot of weddings and then I shot a lot of wildlife and stuff like that, but I never actualized that life of being a wildlife photographer, making a lot of money at it and stuff like that. And for a long time, I was very disappointed in my life. Okay. And I started a painting contracting business. But even when I was painting and everything, and I had my family working with me, I always felt like I was wasting my time. I should not have been a painter. I should have been not somebody that was doing physical work. It was somebody that was using their head, and being a photographer and creating all these things. I had all these dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my son Eric is the same way. He wanted to be someone that did a lot of creative stuff, with his ceramics and stuff like that. And then he went to work as a painter in two different.
And now he's going back to it. Now he's doing all kind of metallurgy, and he's making all kinds of crazy
Yeah,
things out of metal. I mean, it's great. I got the best fire poker ever. It looks all ornate,
yeah,
beautiful cast iron, and then he does a good job. So he still does it, and yeah, it is interesting how people are able to make entire careers out of their art. But there's a big danger with that too, because it's really really easy to allow the crowd to dictate your life. I mean, we saw that with Elvis. I think it was his brother-in-law or something, or maybe his stepbrother or something. Someone who's close to him said that what killed him was not drugs, but rather fame killed him, because that's what the only reason he was taking the drugs is because he was going to the crowd became his god, and appeasing the crowd was his god. And a lot of artists tend to go that way. I mean, and the ones who don't, a lot of times, just they're not successful until they're dead. Vince Van Gogh, died of failure, and it's one of the reasons he committed suicide. And
yeah.
that's a
I
lot
guess
of
he was
happens
only
to artists.
46 years old. He had an interesting life, and he started out as a someone that did gospel music, and then he really got away from that, and he I think he just there was so much that Elvis could have done, but he just lost sight of everything.
Hmm.
And I think that's what happens with a lot of movie stars today. They start becoming part of philanthropy, where they help other people and try to give back to poor countries and stuff like that, because their
and
life
that's
is.
and that's part of the answered prayer being a punch in the face. Is sometimes God's going to come and say, no, you're not going to be a wildlife photographer. That's the big punch in the face. That's not happening. Just let it
Yeah.
die. Hey, no, you're not going to be a famous musician. Just let it die. That's not going to happen. It sometimes we need that punch in the face, because that's exactly what we need.
Do you feel like that's happened to you too?
Oh yeah, I think if that doesn't happen to someone, it's going to happen. God normally finds that we're too rebellious for it not to be. It it just doesn't. And to take from, I think it was Mike Tyson, says everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Okay, here's your punch in the face. Can you grab your son so we can see him?
Oh yeah, so my new wonderful life. Let me see if I
Yeah, your new wonderful life.
is he up still? Oh he is. Perfect.
He's going to get his son. So we have a minute and a half
Yes,
here,
won't
but
be
we
long.
might let this run over.
All right. Oh,
Oh,
look at
look
the
at
little
that.
pulpits.
Well, hello. Uh, Justin, can you tell us what your son's name is?
Yes, his name is Eliezer. His middle name is Rox, and his last name is Tar. So if you read it all out, it ends up becoming Eliezer Rockstar, which is amazing.
Look at that little beautiful face. That is my great grandson. And one of these days, we're going to be on this podcast and with the three of us. And maybe we'll get your dad on there too. Um, Eliezer, what do you call him? Do you have a nickname or anything for him?
I call him Eliezer. Sometimes people call him Eli.
What do they call him?
Eli, sometimes.
Eli.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm curious to see if he's ever going to do anything with his middle name, because that is his on his social security card. That is his given name, Eliezer Rockstar. So, but yeah.
Eli, can you say hi to your grandpa?
Let's
Oh,
see.
that's wonderful. Hold on a second. I'm going to do a screenshot um, of you guys.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that someday I can watch A Wonderful Life with him and teach him the same things
Yes,
that we talked about, and
I would
to
love
be
to be a
grateful
part
for
of
the
that
life
one
that he's
too.
got, because it's very easy to get caught up in selfish ambition instead of what matters.
Okay, I'm going to do a shot here.
You better
Um,
hurry up.
okay, give me a second. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I love that. That is such a good one.
Here.
That's how I put the images up to advertise, and that's one of them.
Thank you, Alondra. I might be a
That was
poet
great,
thinking.
Justin. Thank you very much.
Of course.
And I'm going to close this off here now. This was a great topic. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, especially in God's middle knowledge. So we covered a couple of bases here at once,
Mhm.
and it really was a good thing.
Yes,
So,
and for as a to leave everyone on a cliffhanger for the new year, our the grandson grandfather duo will be talking on our next one about abortion. To celebrate the new year, we'll be talking about why God is against the destruction of new life. And we're going to be talking about that from a biblical perspective, because I personally believe the only truly consistent argument that you can make can only come from a Christian perspective. I think there are a lot of good arguments, but at the end of the day, you can poke holes in all of them, but I only see one that is bulletproof, and that it's contingent on the truthhood of Christianity. So we're going to be talking about that next time.
yeah, I just realized I made a mistake. I thought the show was ending at the 50-minute mark, but it's I stopped at 10 minutes early.
Oh no,
Um,
I'm pretty sure we're still alive here. 52.
yeah,
It looks like it's still alive. So I
yeah, it
mean,
is.
so
Um,
that's all right. We can end it early for Christmas break.
is there anything else that one of the things that Justin and I like to we try not to get too political because everybody knows there's a lot of fighting that's going on, and we sure know about abortion being um, a big topic. But is there anything else? I was trying to figure out where I was going with this. What would we're going to talk about abortion, and is there anything else that you would like to discuss in future podcasts?
Um, I might have a couple cooking, but that's the only one I want to reveal right now.
uh, yes, and we're going to have a great Christmas Eve with our whole family and Justin and Alejandra, his wife, and Eliezer. Justin put up his whole name right there, so if you say it all, Eliezer Rockstar. He's a rock star. And what made you call him that?
I just liked it. I wanted to make a pun out of the middle name because I figure people don't share middle names very often. Or if they do, it's pretty socially accepted to hide your middle name. So if he gets embarrassed on it, he can hide it, or he can just totally embrace it, which I really hope he does.
Yeah, he may go through a couple of different things. Oh, my dad. How did I get a dad like this? But
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you said that about your dad and
yeah. But
your.
I was actually thinking about adding an S legally to my middle name, so that way it goes from Patrick to Patrick's, and then it'll be Justin Patrick's Tar.
Okay. uh, um, real quickly, what do you have any thoughts on what's going on with Israel right now?
I have plenty of thoughts. Anything specific?
Mm, yes, should Okay, this is going to be controversial, but should look at all the demonstrations that have been happening all over, and should Israel leave, get out of Gaza before they accomplish their mission, which is to destroy Hamas?
So, as far as I understand it, God commanded Israel to get rid of and slaughter all of the Canaanites and dispossess everyone in the land. And the two parts of the two parts, the parts that they didn't follow through on way back when are the same places historically now they are experiencing trouble in, such as Gaza. And so, as far as I'm concerned, this is sort of an issue that has gone back, thousands and thousands of years. This is, there's nothing new under the sun. Of course, if the Jews come back, then the Philistines are going to want to attack him. And the word Palestine is just an Hellenized version, transliteration of the name Philistine, named specifically to de-Judaize the land. So, this is nothing new. This is very old, and so it really comes down to what side do you take with the historical narrative. Do you take David's side, or do you take the Goliath's side? Well, we know how that story turns out. I choose not Goliath's side. So I think that's as much of an answer as I can give with us only having 2 minutes left.
Right, right. I do know. At some point, I'd like to do a podcast on evolution because there is a story. There was a movie called what the heck was it called? Uh, I can remember it here, but it was where 16 of the high-ranking Nazis during the second beginning of the Second World War got together, and they were discussing how they were going to liquidate the Jews economically from across the planet, not just in Germany.
In fact, the early Nazis were Zionists, if I remember correctly. Did you know that?
No, what does Zionist mean?
Not Zion just means you support a Jewish state, the Jewish state of Israel, and its right to exist, and the rest. That's Zionism. But the early Nazis, in fact, the Nazis kind of in general were Zionists, and the reason was because the Holocaust project started as a deportation project, and they realized that the logistics of deporting this many Jews to their land, because the idea was send them where they historically want, they'll stay there and stay the hell away from us. That was the thinking. But when they realized that the logistics of deporting that many people and deporting that many people and processing them while also capturing territory that had more Jews that they had to deport, they needed to find a more efficient method of getting rid of them. And that's why they just started shooting them en masse in a massive pogrom, killing thousands and thousands at a time, 1,000 here, a couple hundred here, 1,000 here, going city to city. Once they found that the mental toll was too great on their soldiers is when they started processing them and making it more industrialized, hence Auschwitz and Dachau. But it all started as a deportation process. And especially that especially resonates with me, considering our massive immigration problem we have here in America. And as conservative and anti-illegal immigration as I am, I'm very acutely aware of the fact that we simultaneously need to do something about the massive amount of people in our country, but also that comes with an inherent danger that is exactly how the Holocaust started. So it could very quickly descend into chaos if the right people are not at the helm.
Also, a lot of people don't realize that the German scientists from the time of Darwin were really into evolution. Yeah. And they thought this was because it was survival of the fittest.
You have 60 seconds. You have 60 seconds. Do you have a you have a readout?
Well, let's talk about that because I find it very interesting because that was one of their excuses for wiping out the Jews because they believed in survival of the fittest. And the Jews and people that had disabilities and gypsies should not be alive. So I'm going to leave it right there. And we'll talk about that. We'll do your abortion one and then one on evolution after that. So we'll make a good one of it. Have a Merry Christmas, and I will see you on Christmas Eve. And I love my grandson Justin, and we will do this some more again. See you later. We'll see you in January.
Yes, January.